Hello, everybody. Good evening. Monday morning. What are we? The 6th of July now. Gosh, time marches on, doesn't it? Yes. So, this evening we have got Jackie Bennis back in the Pathlight Thrive Hive to talk about accessing and healing the inner child. Part 1 was last Monday, so you can catch up on that either on the Hive by clicking on the recordings tab or on my YouTube channel. Just go to Pathlight Limited on YouTube if you'd like to catch up on that one if you missed it. And just not necessarily a trigger warning, but just to be aware that some of the material that could be covered today may bring up some emotions for you, some strong emotions. Quite a few people were emotionally affected last week, some tears and some stirring up of stuff. So it's par for the course with the inner child. So just to be aware of that. So, usual gubbins, I'm going to do a bit of sales stuff before we bring Jackie into the studio. And this is your very super last chance to crack on with my mental health first aid course. It starts next Monday. And yeah, we've got some room for some more people if you fancy it. You've really got to book pretty much now, though, otherwise your materials won't arrive in time. So maybe, first thing tomorrow will be your last chance if you want to crack on with that. Really good course. It's 4 mornings. Dates are down there. And just message me if you want more info or go onto my website pathlight.org.uk. That's that one. And as usual, if you want to share the group link with your friends or invite people into the Hive who you think would benefit, that would be splendid. And if you'd like to give us some money, that would also be splendid. And when I say us, I mean me, really. So there's 2 ways you can do it. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive and just buy a coffee, which costs £3. And that's just, if you found a session helpful and you've got £3 spare, you can chuck it my way. Thank you very much. Or you can become a member for £7 a month. You can subscribe, and that gets you some benefits, including discounts off my mental health first aid courses and priority booking for coaching sessions and stuff like that. And also a warm glow for keeping this thing nice and sustainable. Just on the coaching stuff, I'm doing free 15-minute coaching and wellbeing calls at the moment, which you are very welcome to take advantage of. And if you feel we can work together, if I feel I can help you, then we can crack on with some further sessions after that on a paid basis. So lots of info on the website and on my Facebook page as well. Just search Pathlight Limited, Pathlight Ltd on Facebook to find out more. So as usual, if you have any comments, and hello, Myril, you're commenting. Good evening, yes. Just pop your comments in the chat box. If you want us to know who you are, if you haven't done so already, you can give StreamYard, which is this, there we are, I pointed the right way, little ducky icon. This is the software that I use to do these webinar things. You can go to this website here, streamyard.com/Facebook, and then it gives StreamYard permission to share your details so we know who it is when you're commenting. Don't worry if you don't want to, you can just pop your name in, or you can just remain anonymous. Anyway, let's bring Jackie in. So welcome back for your 3rd visit to the Hive, Jackie, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everybody.
So for those who haven't seen you before, Jackie, on one of your previous visits, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, I did the same training that Paul is now doing, and I've been a psychotherapist for just over 20 years. I have my practice in London, but in 2015, I moved to Barcelona. So now I work with clients via Skype, obviously. I'm also a supervisor, so I have supervision clients, and I also see couples. And it's fascinating work, as Paul no doubt tells you all the time. It's very rewarding work, and it's really a passion. I think you've got to have a passion for this kind of work, because otherwise it doesn't work at all. Well, it doesn't work so well, let's put it that way. So that's enough about me. I think Paul is going to show you a little graph.
Yeah, shall I put that up now, Jackie?
Yes.
So, okay, here we are. There we are. Hopefully you can see this, folks. What I will do is just change the size of that. Okay, is that good?
Yeah, that looks great. If anybody resonates with anything on there, maybe you want to make a little note, and we'll have a quick question and answer at the end of this talk. I can see where I am on it. Just to talk about it, if anybody wishes to. It's entirely up to you, but I thought it might be helpful because we're talking about the inner child and the family, the dynamic in the family, and how we get to where we are and what leads us to that place. So I thought that might be interesting.
So would you say these are the kind of 6 key archetypal positions within families, Jackie?
There will be more, but these are the main ones. Let's put it that way. These are the main ones. So, yeah.
So we've got the abuser, the family hero, the prime enabler, the scapegoat, the lost child, and the mascot. So it looks like we've got the kind of key features in there, and in the kind of diamond shapes in the middle of each of those circles. Is that the overriding feelings that apply?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, folks, maybe just have a look at those. I'll leave this up for a couple of minutes, and you can see which role you may have played in childhood in your family of origin. And perhaps we'll come back to this later on, Jackie.
Hopefully we'll have time.
Good stuff. Okay, so Joe's here. Good evening, Joe, as well as Myril. Hello, Myril. Okay, right. So shall I take that down now, Jackie?
Yes, I think everyone's seen it.
Okay, good stuff. We'll come back to it later on.
I just saw a nice quote by Carl Jung, actually. He says, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power, and where the will to power is paramount, love is lacking." So tonight we're going to be looking, first of all, at I'm going to be taking a lot of quotes from a book by James Hollis, the Healing and Wounding of Men Under Saturn's Shadow. I always say Satan's Shadow, and I went into the bookstop in Marylebone High Street and asked them if they had a copy of Satan's Shadow. Luckily, the man knew what I was talking about. So we're gonna look at quite a few points in that book, and then we're going to look at the father-daughter relationship, the Puella, the eternal girl. We're going to look at that. I was going to talk a bit about love addiction, but again, too much material came up. So I think I'm going to have to do another talk at some point, and just to focus solely on love addiction. I think that's probably wise. Okay. So I'll get started. So I'll read you what he says about Saturn. Saturn was the Roman god of agriculture. On the one hand, as a god of generativity, he helped create early Roman civilization. On the other hand, he was associated with a string of dark and bloody stories. His earlier Greek incarnation, Cronus, was born of the male principle Uranus and the female principle Ge or Gaia. Uranus hated his children, for he feared their potential. Legend tells us he was the first to devise shameful actions. His wife Gaia fashioned a sickle and induced Cronus to attack his father. Cronus struck and severed his father's phallus. From the drops of blood that fell on the earth were born fearsome giants. The sperm-flecked fecundated sea gave birth to Aphrodite, whose name means born of the foam. Saturn, there we go again. Saturn, replaced his father and became a tyrant of equal magnitude. Whenever he and his consort Rhea produced children, he ate them. The only child who evaded this fate was Zeus. In turn, Zeus led a revolt against the father, and a 10-year war ensued. With Zeus's triumph, many civilizing forces emerged, but he too fell prey to the power complex and became tyrannical. Thus, the Cronus-Saturn story is one of power, jealousy, insecurity, violence to the principle of eros, to generativity, and to the earth. As Jung once noted, oh, well, here it is, again, the quote, where power is, love is not. Okay, so I'm now going to read you the 8 secrets men carry within. Men's lives are, this is the first one, men's lives are as much governed by restrictive role expectations as are the lives of women. 2, men's lives are essentially governed by fear. 3, the power of the feminine is immense in the psychic economy of men. 4, men collude in a conspiracy of silence, whose aim is to suppress their emotional truth. 5, because men must leave mother and transcend the mother complex, wounding is necessary. 6, men's lives are violent because their souls have been violated. Every man carries a deep longing for his father and for his tribal fathers. And we'll talk a bit about that later. If men are to heal, they must activate within what they did not receive from without. So, Hollis also says actually that depression is learned helplessness, and that fear and lethargy are the enemies that keep us from moving forward.
Yes. A friend of mine, Sid, if you're watching, talks about that. He's a musician, and he says first we have to overcome those twin evils of lethargy and fear. I'm pretty sure it was Sid that said that. That's one of the key ways to transformation, is overcoming fear, replacing it by love and hope, I feel. And lethargy, just being lazy. You've got to get off your backside and get stuff done.
Yeah. Easier said than done. So let's move this over here. So if we look at a couple of those secrets, so the first one is that men's lives are as much governed by role expectations as are the lives of women. It is the growing awareness of this terrible discrepancy between role expectations and the needs of the soul that has given rise to men's groups. I know of a very good one. I think their base is in Brighton, but I think, unless I'm mistaken, they have groups throughout the UK, maybe not that many, but nevertheless, the main one is going really strong. And it's called Band of Brothers. And there's a mentoring program going on for young boys that have been in prison, boys that have been in trouble, boys that have come from troubled homes. But I think they also admit into their group older men as well. I mean, all the mentors obviously are older men, and they have weekly meetings, and they arrange to go away for weekends, camping and stuff like that, while all this mentoring is going on, and while the young boys can talk about their problems, they start to talk about, their history and where they've come from and the problems that they've encountered in their lives. So they begin to share their emotions and begin to unblock and share the pain and poison that has been held collectively for centuries, basically. In ancient times, a young man nearing maturity would have gone through various rituals and initiation processes by his tribal elders. This is how it works. And where there are very old tribes still in existence, this initiation process will still go ahead. And by doing that, he would have learned of his birthright and power as a man. So just as he was reaching maturity, he would have, and some of the initiations and rituals would have been quite tough, but he had to leave mother in order to do them. So the next bit, the next point that he made on that list was that men's lives are initially governed by fear. So I'm just going to read something about that, which is quite long. Because men cannot undo what fragile strength they have assembled, they can scarcely admit to themselves or others how much fear influences them. But the healing of a man will require that he cease feeling shamed by his fear. And this is Hollis talking, right? I have always admired the freedom of women to acknowledge their fears, to share them, and thereby reap the support of others. For a man to so acknowledge the place of fear in his life is to risk feeling unmanly and to expect shaming by others, so his isolation deepens. But this secret is out, fellows. Even your women are onto you. Indeed, they always have been. While researching this book, I came across an article in the March 1992 issue of Yes, Ladies' Home Journal. Men's secret fears, what he'll never tell you. So they have found us out. In essence, the article correctly identifies men's two fundamental fears: the fear of not measuring up and the fear of physical or psychological trial. So the fear of not measuring up is the Saturnian shadow at its most obvious: competition, winners, losers, productivity as the measure of manhood. The fear of trial, the fifth phase of the initiatory rites, is expressed by men who doubt their ability to defend themselves and their family. How many films, from Straw Dogs to Cape Fear, have stirred this caveman in us, defender of the hearth? Indeed, many men confide that they are more afraid of illness, incapacity, and impotence than of death. When I have said as much to an audience, on the logical face of it is absurdity, for what could be more frightening than death? Invariably, men have nodded their heads. Yes, they are more afraid of the trial, of failing the ordeal, than of death itself. Impotence, powerlessness in any of its forms is worse than annihilation. Work, war, and worry. Governed as he is by fear, unable to admit this to himself, lest his hold on things slip, unable to share with his comrades, lest he is shamed, a man compensates. The man who boasts of his big car or big house or big position with a big title is surely compensating to some degree for how small he feels. Upscale lunches and power over others may serve an Oedipus complex, but they are pathetic substitutes for genuine empowerment. As that late great American philosopher Pearl Bailey expressed it, them's what thinks they is, ain't. Beneath displays of power is the complex. Beneath the complex lies fear. No animal is more dangerous than one that is frightened. Perhaps Freud was right when he said that all things were sexual, or Adler in giving primacy to power. For when Eros is injured, it resorts to the gambit of power. The power complex is the central force in the lives of men. It drives them and wounds them. Out of their rage, they wound others, and out of their sorrow and shame, they grow more and more distant from each other. The cost of this mutual wounding is enormous, repetitive and cyclic. Whatever is unconscious is internalized in debilitating ways or projected onto others and acted out destructively. The cost of these first two secrets, that men's lives are as much governed by role expectations as women's, and that men are secretly ruled by fear, is rather easy to discern in the sufferings of individual men and the pathology of our society. American men die, on the average, 8 years before women. They are 4 times more likely to be substance abusers, and also 4 times more likely to take their own lives. They are 11 times more likely to spend time in jail. And these statistics do not even begin to plumb the depth of male rage, male sadness, male isolation. Quite a bit to think.
That's, to me, Jackie, it's really sad. It's actually tragic, I think, that men define themselves in this way. It's this projection of power, and that's how they deem success and esteem, from saying, yes, here's my big house, my big car, my wonderful job, and that's what success is. And it's this one-upmanship and competitiveness all the time, which just seems really a really unhealthy way to judge a human being and to set up society.
But that's how society is set up, and that's learned behavior from parents and, right down the line. And also this thing about needing to have something to show for it. The man himself isn't enough. He has to have all these objects to prove that he's something, that he really amounts to something. That, as you say, that is really sad. So I don't know if anybody wants to start writing questions, and then we can look at them sort of on the next pause, so that if anybody's got any questions on that, we can look at them after I've read this other piece. Let me get my pages right. Okay, so right. So often a woman who has not lived out her own life, has not developed her own animus, tries to keep her son under her psychic dominance.
Would it be helpful here, Jackie, just to give a brief explanation of what anima and animus are?
Yes, why don't you do that, Paul?
Oh gosh, pressure, right, okay. So
no, I can do it, but I'm aware I'm
always
always talking here, and I want to give you a little bit of space as well.
Oh, thank you. Spoken like a true psychotherapist. So I'll have a go, and then you can correct me.
Yeah.
So this is a Jungian concept.
Yes.
And the idea is that within us we have a kind of soul being, which is of the opposite gender. So the anima is the female, is that right?
Animus is the male, yes. Animus is the male part of the female, and anima is the female part of the male. Yes.
That's right. So it's a kind of slightly unconscious aspects of us. So what Jackie was saying there around males who go around with power as their definition of success. That's very much the male psyche, coming from the Freud's libido, I suppose. But within that man, somewhat subdued, is the anima, which is their feminine counterpart, with all those more gentle and nurturing characteristics and creativity and stuff like that. And vice versa for ladies, they have the animus within them, which is that more dynamic, powerful character, perhaps with a more competitive edge and adventurousness, that type of stuff.
And that shows very clearly in the kind of occupations women choose as well. You can often see that, where that's, you know, very prominent, you know, a woman in a man's world, a woman being very successful, a woman who isn't so fussed about bringing up a family, or, she wants her role and she wants her position. And so she goes for it, and you can feel that masculine energy in the way she directs her life and in the profession she chooses and the way she lives her life. Just as men, you know, men have a tough time because I'm really in tune with men with a lot of feminine nature, because they're soft. You can feel it straight away, the energy. Animals respond very well to men who have a lot of feminine energy. They really do. I've noticed it with my animals. If I get a bolshy man coming in shouting and, you know, full of himself and loud and everything, the animals run a mile. But somebody who has a very gentle energy, they can't get rid of the animals. The animals are all over them. So it's really prominent. So let's go to a bit. Oh, this is a lovely bit. This is my favorite bit in this book. So he's talking about the woman who has not lived her own life, and not developed her own animus, tries to keep her son under her control forever, kind of thing. So he's quoting from one of his clients, and he said, "A man who was having considerable difficulties in his marriage finally mustered the strength to ask his mother to butt out and allow him to work out his relationship with his wife without interference. He showed me her reply on a small piece of paper. Dear son, you will never know how you have broken your mother's heart. Of the 10 men who could have been your father, you will only ever have one mother. I do not have long for this earth, but I hope that I can have my son back before I die. Love, your mother." And Hollis says, "Someday there will be a Mother's Hall of Fame in which this letter belongs. It hits all the buttons: guilt for ruining her animus projection, denigration of the man's father, and the implication that the son is responsible for her well-being. Rather than laugh at her overt heavy-handedness or rage at the manipulation, the man felt crushed. How, he asked, am I to write back? He was so completely under her psychic influence that he could not see through her. He could only passively suffer. Moreover, he had been so stripped of his own empowerment that he could not hold his half of the marital relationship. Her note and the relationship was not about love, but about power. Again, as Jung noted, where power is, love is not." And he goes on to say that similarly, I have seen a considerable number of men in therapy whose need for mothering is so extensive that they are doomed to be dissatisfied with their wives. While it is clear that women do not want to be mothers to their husbands, It is also clear that many men seek in their wives the sort of unconditional acceptance and nourishment associated with positive mothers. Indeed, I have seen many men stuck in marriages that were dreadful for various reasons, but they were unable to countenance the idea of leaving. Departure held all the terrors of the child, leaving home for the unknown. Sexuality in particular is freighted with the infantile need for bodily contact and nurturance. As women grow weary of taking care of little boys, so little boys find it harder and harder to leave home and grow up, since neither father nor the fathers are available to show the way. When men feel the push-pull of the mother complex, they are apt to confuse that power with the outer woman in their life, just as they often regress to intimate relationships, making mother of their partner, unconsciously demanding she be the good breast. So they fear and oppress women, as if by controlling them, they might master the fear of their own undertow. The sorry history of men's treatment of women is stark testimony to this. One oppresses what one fears. Fear is responsible for the oppression of women and the gay bashing, the latter most notably by young men insecure in their own psychological reality. The resistance President Clinton encountered in proposing to end the ban on homosexuals in the American military was not because there were no homosexuals already serving bravely and honorably, nor because regulations regarding sexual harassment were not already in place, but because of the macho man's fear of his own feminine side. So, it's sad. It's really sad. And I'm sure everybody knows somebody in their family or best friend's family, or, you know, a couple who are in completely the wrong relationship for the wrong reasons, and some compensation is going on, some you know, unspoken distortion is going on within the marriage, within the relationship.
And it will be unspoken because it's unconscious largely. So what you were saying there, Jackie, about the man who tries to make his wife into his mother, because he wasn't nurtured, he didn't get that what he needed from his mum in childhood. It isn't healthy. It isn't possible in a healthy relationship to do that. But he'll 9 times out of 10 be completely unconscious that that's what's going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's an example of a mother-son relationship. Well, I think it is, but you can tell me what you think. So this is somebody I used to know, and this, I'm not using the real names, obviously. So Katie is a highly anxious woman. She's been with her partner, Kevin, for 35 years. Kevin doesn't openly display his feelings, talk about his past or his childhood. Katie makes most of the decisions in their household. When it's time to renovate the kitchen or redecorate the house, etc., etc. She organizes everything, saying things like, oh, well, if I waited for Kevin to organize it, nothing would ever get done. She draws up plans, talks them over with Kevin, who generally agrees. Similarly, Katie organizes all their entertainment, who and when they go on holiday with, summer parties, dinner parties, and she does a regular Friday night dinner with at least 6 of her single or divorced girlfriends. Kevin doesn't talk a lot, except when he's not with Katie. When alone with other people, he talks a great deal. He almost never invites work colleagues home. And I don't believe he has any friends outside work. I learned from Katie that Kevin, as an only child, lived in a kind of bubble with his parents. They didn't socialize or mix with family. Kevin wasn't encouraged to bring school friends home, and celebrations for Christmas and birthdays were shared between the 3 of them. So his family weren't sociable people at all. And when Katie first met Kevin, she wanted to discuss having a family, but sensed that Kevin didn't, so she never brought the subject up. She used to get upset when Kevin didn't introduce her to or bring his work friends home. And once she made a big fuss when she was doing a summer garden party, and a couple of his colleagues did get invited to that. Katie is extremely codependent, always worrying about what other people think. And when Kevin travels abroad for work, which he does quite frequently, Katie frantically fills her week by going out with friends, as she feels uncomfortable spending time on her own. In order to get her needs met, Katie is capable of telling downright lies. And apart from the time when Kevin is traveling for work, Katie rarely goes anywhere without him. So that's one example. And here's an example that amused me, although it's not a very pretty subject. But when I was trying to think of an example, I thought of Norman Bates. I don't know if anybody's seen Psycho, the original, or the later films, but the film was actually based on a 1959 novel by Robert Bloch, and Bloch based Norman's character on a serial killer called Ed Gein. And Gein had lived with an oppressive mother, wore women's clothes, and created a shrine to his mother after her death. Norman's character portrays his life with an oppressive mother who comes across as smothering him with love, which shows her obsessive need for her little boy not to grow up so she can take care of him forever, because of her desperate need to ensure that he only has love for her. I'd just like to go back to the subject of men's fear, and I just read you this. Oh, I'm aware of the time, and it's rather a long passage because, but it's important. I'll just read you this bit. Whenever and wherever we see men seeking to control women, we are seeing fear's ugly work. Until a man becomes conscious of the effects of his mother complex, which is what you were talking about, Paul, he will suffer troubled relationships. His anguish and anger will be internalized at his own expense, or projected at the expense of others. Until he becomes conscious of the lattice work of history he carries within, he has not grown up. All the neediness of the inner child remains active in the present, as well as his fear of the mother's power to overwhelm or abandon him. This is why so many men seek to control their partner, for they feel the other, as before, is all powerful still. And yet their deep infantile need has not been satisfied either. So they seek to make their partner into mother. All our unassimilated need, fear, and rage are acted out in intimate relationships. The closer these relationships, the more contaminated they are with the detritus of the primal relationship that the boy, man, carries. Okay. I'm aware of the time, and I think my watch is fast. What time you have for?
8:40.
Okay.
I'm happy to go on beyond 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock your
Okay.
time, if that's okay.
Well, I would just like to. I would like to be fair. We've been talking about men all night. I'd like to be fair and now talk about The Wounded Woman, which is the book by Linda Shears Leonard, relating to the healing the father-daughter relationship. So I'd like to go into that a bit.
Okie dokie. Yeah, we've had a comment from Karen. It might be this was from some time ago, but I think this is a case similar to the example of Katie, maybe that you were presenting there.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly that. Yeah. Perfect,
like
Karen.
That control freak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Needing to have all the control. I once asked her, she was moaning and complaining about putting these Christmas lights up. And I said, why don't you ask him to do that? Oh, he'd never do it right, she said. So there you are. Anyway, so now we're going to look at the wounding of women, and I'll be quoting from this book. And it deals with the healing, the father-daughter relationship, and identifies the Puella Aeternus, or the eternal girl. And Leonard has identified two patterns in the wounded relationship to the father. The author says, where am I here? Yes. In myself and in my female clients, I've found two opposing patterns that frequently result from a wounded relationship to the father. And these two conflicting patterns frequently exist together in the psyche of a wounded woman, doing battle with each other. One pattern I call the eternal girl, the Puella. The other I call the armored Amazon. So the eternal girl, or Puella, is a woman who psychologically has remained a young girl, even though chronologically she may be 60 or 70 years old. She remains a dependent daughter, tending to accept the identities others project on her. My mother, unfortunately, was one of these. In doing so, she gives over to others her own strength, as well as the responsibility for shaping her identity. Quite often, she marries a rigid authoritarian, a man who becomes the image, a man who, a rigid authoritarian man, and becomes the image of the woman that he wants. Often she looks and acts innocent, helpless, and passive. So she may rebel, but in her rebellion remains the helpless victim, caught in feelings of self-pity, depression, and inertia. In either case, she is not directing her own life. In dreams of such women, I've found several recurrent images. This is the author that's talking, not me. One dream theme is the loss of one's wallet, with all one's identity cards and money. I'll just say that in both the wounding and healing of men and in the father-daughter relationship, dreams reveal the huge impact these wounds have on the dreamers, where unconscious material makes itself conscious. So now I'm going to read a bit of this here. Right. Hang on. No. This is the armored Amazon. The armored Amazon is a contrasting pattern in the lives of many women. Developmentally, I find that this pattern arises as a a reaction against inadequate fathering, occurring either on the personal or cultural level. In reacting against the negligent father, such women often identify on the ego level with the masculine or fathering functions themselves. Since their fathers didn't give them what they needed, they find they have to do it themselves. So they build up a strong masculine ego identity through achievement or fighting for a cause or being in control and laying down the law themselves. Perhaps as a mother who rules the family as though it were a business firm. But this masculine identity is often a protective shell, an armor against the pain of abandonment or rejection by their fathers, an armor against their own softness, weakness, and vulnerability. The armor protects them positively insofar as it helps them develop professionally and enables them to have a voice in the world of affairs. But insofar as the armor shields them from their own feminine feelings and their soft side, these women tend to become alienated from their own creativity, from healthy relationships with men, and from the spontaneity and vitality of living in the moment. In my office every day, I see women who are successful, in the world, accomplished in their fields, financially independent. To the outer eye, they seem secure and confident, powerful and strong. But inside the safety of the therapist's office, they reveal their tears, the confessions of weariness and exhaustion, the great loneliness. Many times the image of armor comes up in their dreams. One woman dreamt of a weak little man, tired of life and about to die, who was dressed in a protective coat of armor and helmet, shield and sword. Later on, in the course of analysis, as she let go of the unnecessary armor, she dreamt she found a diamond treasure hidden in a pile of open oyster shells. Her emphasis now was on being in the moment and open to relationships, and she felt softer and more mellow. The shell was now open and the genuine diamond strength accessible. So the woman dressed in Amazon armor is as cut off from her own center as the eternal girl. In fact, in most women, these two patterns, have I read this already? No.
Well, I think you mentioned that they're kind of there at the same time in opposition to each other.
Yes,
is that right?
yes. Well, anyway, they cross. They can be both at the same time. So in most women, the two patterns are there alternating, sometimes from moment to moment. For example, one woman who did a lot of public speaking still felt like the fragile girl who was afraid she might faint before everyone. So it's a similar. They feel alienated from their center because they're cut off from important parts of themselves. It is as though they have a mansion for a home, but are only living in a few of the rooms. So now a similar set of behavior is revealed in the man of this type, the Puer Aeternus. These are men who have not really fully grown up, who remain very close to mother, usually, who often in middle age still, and the mother often in middle age still treats them like a child. In the elemental model, these men are air types. So their feet hardly touch the ground. They float. And they usually have difficulties around secure boundaries and taking responsibility. and they can create tension, which can create tension in relationships. They very often drift from job to job, and maybe some of them become like an old hippie type, just traveling around, traveling constantly. So I'll give you an example of this type in the male. So this is Donald, or as he's still referred to by his parents, by his childhood name of Donnie. Donnie is now in his late 30s. And for the last 4 to 5 years, Donnie has been traveling around. That's his passion, just traveling. He's now met a girl and recently, and they have a little baby, and he's now living in his parents, in an apartment within his parents' home. He was the late addition in this family, 4 other siblings, and a couple of them were already in their 20s when Donald was born. His father's now retired and is 80, and his mother is in her mid-60s. The family own a huge mansion full of the most beautiful antique furniture and paintings in a very nice area of London. And they're what is known as asset rich and cash poor. So Donald didn't enjoy school, didn't want to go to university, and he started running a couple of his own businesses, but didn't really ever work for any company or any private enterprise. And in 2015, his mother asked me to drop over for a cup of tea. Both his parents were there, and they told me they had a dilemma, because Donald was planning to go off abroad again, and he didn't have any money for his trip. So they told me with looks of horror on their faces that he was contemplating selling his vintage sports car. And I, being the therapist and a friend, I asked them to explore a bit whether they should leave him to take responsibility for himself, for his own situation. He was no longer a boy, and put down some boundaries around trying to stop trying to solve his problems. God, they both threw their hands up in horror, saying they couldn't let Donnie sell that car. So we were sitting on a beautiful 19th century wrought iron balcony, and Donald's mother had told me that if she didn't get it repaired very soon, the whole thing was going to fall apart. But she just didn't have the cash to do it, to get it repaired. And, then I realized, my sort of trying to help was falling on deaf ears here. So I quickly shut up. So then she went on to tell me that she got very excited that she'd found in an old antique catalogue of years past a 19th century Sèvres plate, French plate, antique plate that had sold for over £2,000. And she said, "You wouldn't believe it. I have one. I have one in the house. I have absolutely one that's identical." So anyway, we finished our tea and then I left. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, she called me to tell me that she'd sold the plate and it had realized above the auctioneer's estimate. So she got a pretty penny for it. And of course, what did they do? They gave it to Donnie so he could go on his trip.
Mm. And we probably all know somebody like that, perhaps not quite so asset rich and cash poor, but just the child that has never grown up, whether it's in the male form or the female form, the Puella or the Puer. Yeah, it's stifling.
And he will never change. I mean, he once bragged that he was just, one day they're going to die, and he's got all that beautiful furniture in that house, and he's going to have he's got siblings, of course, he has to share it with. But, he's not going to change now. That's it. There's no way. Nor are they helping him to, but amazing.
They're colluding with his emasculation, really, aren't they?
Yes. Well, it's because of their behavior that he is the way he is, of course. He was always treated like the baby. I mean, this was a surprise birth. She wasn't expecting to have any more children. And so he became the baby, and he remained the baby, fortunately. So I was going to talk a bit about women who love too much, but I think we're getting near, for one, to answer questions and stuff. Getting near to time, aren't we?
Yeah, well, if you're going to come back and do love addicts, maybe we could make it
I can do this
and
love.
Yeah,
and I can do a bit, because I've just done there's a very short bit on that, and I can research it a bit more fully, which would be good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So love addicts and love avoiders.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yes.
Okay, well, that was really interesting. And yeah, it's brought up a lot of stuff for me around myself, but also people I know, and images coming to mind of people who are one of the ways you've described. And it's helped me to understand why they are that way. And yeah, it's almost always to do with the parenting, isn't it? And unconscious behaviours that get passed down through the generations.
The molding, the kids, small children, they're like sponges. They absorb absolutely everything. So, it's normal that we get to adulthood and we find we have certain issues that we don't understand. We struggle with certain things, and it's not always easy to talk to parents. It's not easy to draw them out, and especially if it's a family that don't talk about that kind of stuff, and it's impossible.
Yeah, and I suppose we should say there's no blame attached here. There's no
absolutely not. No, they did what they could. They did what they could with the tools they had, and which were passed down to them. And as Bradshaw says, it's very often parents, particularly young parents, they go into parenting and they're just like kids themselves, and they're trying to bring up a child, and they have such. They're like two kids trying to bring up a child. How on earth are they supposed to know what to do unless somebody's guiding them? So,
Yeah, I mean, that resonates with me as well. I was in my 30s when I had my first child, and it's actually been through having children and being a parent that I've grown up. I've learned about myself. I've learned about parenting, and I've learned about humanity more through parenting and I suppose through psychotherapy as well. Have been the two things that really made me understand. So maybe, that's kind of the way of the world, that we no matter what age we are when we have children, if we choose to have them, we're going to go into it with at least one eye shut. Absolutely.
Stumbling along, trying to get it right, and then we've got our own stuff to cope with, and our own buttons are being pressed. And, if you think about it, it's a huge thing. It's not an easy thing. It's a huge thing. A lot of people barely manage to look after themselves, never mind, a small child. So it's a huge thing.
Yeah. And I suppose the other thing that plays in here that you mentioned earlier, Jackie, is around social conditioning. So it isn't just how the parents are and what they lacked in their own childhood from their parents. It's also about these roles that are society dictates. This is what a man should be. Men need to be powerful. They need to be judged based on their performance at work, their productivity, as you said, and women need to be nurturing, they need to be X, Y, and Z. And these are very unhelpful stereotypes, I would suggest.
Well, think about if you go to a party and you start meeting people you've never met before. The men generally, the first thing they ask is, so what do you do? So, where do you... And the women too, a bit. But I mean, it's very important for the men to sort of, make this clear right from the word go, the minute they meet somebody. Oh, well, I've worked for da-da-da. You know, work is so important, you know. And then you get somebody coming in saying, well, I live in the forest and I built my own house, and it's a totally different incomprehensible scenario for men who are fixated on the power of who they work for, how much salary they make, you know, what kind of house they have, and but you know, and other people's, you're right, other people's stereotypical view of that, you know, being afraid of some people because they feel too strong and too powerful, you know, hardly daring to talk to the guy who lives in the great big house at the end of the road, you know, because he's not one of us, kind of thing. And all this stuff, it just messes us up.
Yes. Yeah, it is that thing, isn't it, of what do you do, and defining people by their job, and not just in parties. It happened to me in the barbers today. First haircut after lockdown, and I was trying to speak to the barber about his feelings. You know, I suppose that's where I come from. And I said, "So, how have you felt reopening after 3 months off, and how did you feel in that time when you were in lockdown?" He said, "Oh, I was so bored." And then he said, "So what do you do?" And I thought, oh dear, I thought we were getting into feelings there, but no. So yeah, when people ask me that, it's usually it is men, but sometimes women as well. What do you do? I like to kind of tease a bit, and I say, "Oh, I do lots of things. I'm a dad. I play the guitar. I go running. I do all sorts of things." And what I counter it with is what do you love, which is one of the questions I ask all the guests on the Hive. What are your passions? Because I think that's how we can get to know a human being and what their qualities are, what's important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I've just learned this evening, Jackie, that I can put comments up on the screen. I didn't know that before.
I can see, yes, that's wonderful.
So here we are. We have a Puella Aeternus here in Karen, it seems. So,
anybody ask any questions about the diagram?
Oh, yes, let's go back to the diagram. Yes, let's bring that back up again. Thank you. I'd forgotten about that. So here we are.
And thanks for sharing that, Karen. Thanks for everybody who shared.
Yes, indeed. Right, so there we go. Has anybody identified themselves here as one of these? Withdrawing, good kid, the family hero, enabler, mascot, lost child, or scapegoat? And if so, what questions or comments might you have on that from that family of origin unit? In the meantime,
I suppose everybody knows about the dynamic that exists within the family, where everyone has a set. It's not named, of course, but everyone has a set role within the family in order to balance the family, even if they're dysfunctional roles. It's in order to balance the family. So one person will be the black sheep, one person will be the star, one person will be the carer, one person will take responsibility, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to assume that everyone does know that, but it is interesting to look at our families of origin and identify who played which role.
Yes.
And it is astonishing how common it is, especially with families who have 2 or more children, that almost always there will be a scapegoat and a star and
Absolutely.
an enabler. Yeah. So we'll see if anyone comes up with any comments there. We have a question. So I'll put this up here. Can you heal the father-daughter relationship if you've lost a father at a young age? So not actually had a father figure. Good question. Whoever that was that put that through. What do you reckon, Jackie?
Well, yes, you could do that in therapy very easily. Do that in therapy. Look at, bringing up the, well, it depends. Well, I suppose it depends what the family was like. If the family spoke about the lost father, if they were willing to talk about their experiences with the father, it would be very difficult for a child, say if the child lost their father at 2 years or 3 years or something. and had, of course, then had no recollection of their own memories of their father, and the family didn't talk about it, didn't talk about him, because then it's very, you know, they've got nothing to work on, except they could work on what they would have found nourishing in a father. You know, even if they had no background of their father, they could talk about their imaginary father, the father that they would have loved to have had, and how they would have imagined how that would have been, and what their father would have done for them. So you can still work on it, even if you have no information or memory. But if you have information, I mean, if you were, say, 8 or 9 years old when you lost your dad, then you would have your own memories to work on. And then you could work on that and turn it around, you know, get to a point where you could turn it around, where you could show forgiveness or have forgiveness for that father figure, and have forgiveness, of course, for yourself as well, because it's about forgiving ourselves as well. But it's not impossible to work on a deceased parent.
Yeah.
Have a dialogue with a deceased parent.
So I suppose, yeah, as you say, that the older the child was when the parents died or exited, yes, through whatever, yes, way, the easier it would be. But yeah, I think a big part of therapy quite often is that reparenting, isn't it?
Yes, that's exactly it. But also, you know, a child that's abandoned, the father goes off and they never see him again. You know, that works the same way, because it's like a death, because the father has disappeared, or a parent has disappeared. But in this case, the father-daughter relationship, yes, that can be worked on. I mean, it would be wonderful if someone's father was still alive and they could get to a point where they could actually do what you're doing with your mother, Paul. Actually have a dialogue and, you know, have to have that kind of dialogue. A lot of parents won't talk about the past, you know. It's unfortunate, but they just won't. So you have to do the work yourself in that case. But it can be done. It does work.
Yeah. And when you say do it yourself, it is quite often we do need a third party, a skilled psychotherapist or something to work it through.
Or go to a group, you know, a group that deals with loss, that deals with abandonment, and do some work there. But absolutely, no, just talking to your inner, you know, your inner child and trying to do it that way would be very difficult if you didn't have somebody to help you, to lead you, not to lead you, but to help you on that journey.
Yeah, to facilitate the space and also to be heard, isn't it? And ask the right questions, be witnessed in expressing that difficult stuff, and to feel safe and held as well in that environment.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see my father for 20 years. My parents were divorced. My mother divorced my father when I was 4, and I didn't see him again until I was 24. And then I saw him. He'd remarried. His wife was extremely jealous of my mother, but you know, and this was years after, she was still extremely jealous. And I used to go and visit them. I visited them a lot after I divorced and I had more time, and I used to go every couple of months to see them. And his wife, I noticed every time I went, she would dig up the past and rake up the past, because of course she felt that I was brought up by my aunts, my granny, while my mother worked, and she felt that all the women in my family had behaved scandalously towards my father. He'd done nothing wrong and they'd behaved really dreadfully. And she used to bring it up every time. And every time after the second day, he would stop speaking to me, because he was there listening to all this muckraking. And he would stop speaking to me, and then he would become so loving towards her. Here, dear, I've made you an orange juice, and giving me the cold shoulder completely, until finally, I think it was my 4th visit. And here she started again, straight away with all the old stuff, pulling it out, throwing it out. And finally I said, look, I know what's going to happen now. Tomorrow I can feel it with you already. I looked directly at my father and I said, I can feel it already. You're already freezing me out and I know what's going to happen. And this time I'm not going to sit through it. So if you're going to do that this time, I'm going to go upstairs, I'm going to pack my bag and I'm going. And he didn't, of course. He didn't do it. And he never did it again. But I couldn't imagine his wife, because after I'd said all that, she looked at him and she said, as though it was his fault, she said, yes, you see that? Listen to that. If you behave like that, people will leave.
And there's denial for you and projection.
Lovely. I mean, they could have said, oh, well, if you feel like that, then just go. And that would have been the end to it. But they didn't.
Oh, it's very good that you laid down some healthy boundaries there and you could see what was going on and you expressed it.
Oh, I didn't want 2 days of torture of being frozen out. It was so unpleasant. And then we'd be all right after that, once we got over the 2 days. But I thought, what the hell is going on here? I don't need to have this anymore. I'm not happy with this.
Yeah, and I suppose one more thing that's come to mind for me around the that question again about healing the father-daughter relationship or the mother-son relationship. If the parent is absent, either through death, through physical absence, if they've been abandoned, divorced, whatever. But also I think it applies if you've been emotionally or spiritually abandoned. So, I know someone whose dad was there throughout most of their childhood, but they were an alcoholic and, chose the pub over the child. So effectively they were there, but not there.
Yeah. Or a parent who's depressed. A depressed parent, or with an illness, a parent with an illness, where the child is just blocked out completely.
Yeah,
that's hard. That's heavy duty stuff. Yeah.
So yes, some questions. Well, a question that was hanging over for me from part one of this talk, which again, folks, if you didn't catch it, you can check it on the recordings tab of the Hive, or you can go to the YouTube channel, Pathlight Limited, was, okay, this is all great stuff, very insightful and interesting, but how do we access and how do we heal the inner child? I think we have kind of answered that today through psychotherapy, group work, that type of stuff, but is there anything else that you want to bring around other ways of accessing and healing the inner child?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're in therapy, then you learn how to explore, how to do dialogue work, how to talk to that inner part of you and work in that way, or through visualizations, through drawing, through art. I mean, there are many mediums. But, when you think about that, most people in their families, there's an element of codependency. There might be one or two addictions or, problems within the family. So, there are, in the UK, there are so many groups going on and AA. You have so many groups for, Alcoholics Anonymous, for gamblers, for children of alcoholics, codependents. So there are groups to go and talk. And sometimes it's, if people are hesitant about talking about themselves, it's the act of listening to somebody else daring to talk. And many people in these groups, the same people, a lot of the same people go again and again and again. And, they've been going for years, so they know the system inside out. They know how it works. And they actually, just hearing somebody else name it can facilitate us to have the courage to name it. So there are many ways, and there are lots of, institutions out there that give therapy on a voluntary basis, short-term counselling. There are lots of agencies that do that. So it's good to talk. It's good to just be able and to talk to a stranger as well. Because somebody they're not judging you. They're just listening. They're just hearing you. I mean, I remember when I first started my training, we were encouraged to do something called crisis listening. And I found a placement at Marylebone Church on Marylebone Road. And in the crypt, they had a counselling service. And because I had just started my training, I could only do, first of all, it was crisis listening, then it was befriending, and then it was actual counselling, right, within an agency. So I did the crisis listening first, and it meant that you didn't know if somebody, it was a drop-in, so you didn't know if you're going to get people to drop in. But you had your hours that you were going to spend there, and most of the time somebody did just drop in, somebody with a problem, and they just needed somebody to hear them. And these kind of facilities in the UK are fabulous. They're fabulous opportunities for somebody who is perhaps nervous of talking about themselves or speaking about their past, or sharing anything like that, just to go to some place where you don't know the person, you will never see them again, but you feel heard, you feel understood. Somebody is there to listen.
The Caravan in St. James's Church as well in London.
Yes, I didn't go to that. I never joined that. I went to prison instead. I went to counsel prisoners instead. But yes, a lot of people did that one. Yeah. Yes. And that's a drop-in centre.
It is, yeah. So Karen, my therapist, provided a safe space for me, which was important, but he also helped me to build a visualization board so I could go back and nurture my inner child.
Very good. Very good.
Excellent. So yeah, creativity, visualization, creative imagination is a really powerful intervention.
Sand tray work. Have you done sand tray work yet?
We haven't had the session on that yet, but I know a little about it. Yes.
Very powerful sand tray work. Really, really powerful. Yeah. So that's excellent. Yes, that's a way of building a picture, making it more concrete, making it more real. And art is a beautiful medium as well.
Yeah, because we bypass the intellect, don't we, when we're doing creative stuff, and it's coming from within us, and we can interpret what we've put down. It's
intuitive. It's really very intuitive. Sorry, Paul, you were going to say something.
No, I was just kind of going to ask you if there's anything else before we draw to a close.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Excellent.
I'll get cracking on the other thing, and eventually I'll do that.
Marvellous. Well, no pressure time-wise to get that done, but thank you very much. Once again, for your presence, all the preparation you've done, your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience. It's really, really interesting, and hopefully our audience have found it useful as well. Thank you, audience, for all your interaction. And I suppose the other thing to say is, you're talking about it's good to talk, as you mentioned earlier on my walk and talk, Jackie, and those sort of talking groups, such as Brothers in Arms, which I'm pretty sure I've seen a documentary on. Band of Brothers. Yeah, I'm thinking of a box set I've got. Band of Brothers, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen a documentary on that, and that's powerful work they do. If you are a man, you're very welcome to come along to Man Tuesday tomorrow, because it's Tuesday tomorrow. So that's 6 o'clock every Tuesday on Zoom, and talk about some inner child stuff if you like, or just whatever's going on for you, and that safe space to be heard and witnessed and non-judgmental. So that's.
Do you share that? Do you run that group, Paul? Is that your group? Excellent. Very good idea.
Yeah, because it's good to talk, especially if you're a man, because a lot of men don't talk about their feelings. They just talk about beer and football and being stereotypical. So, yes, Karen, yes, very good. Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, Joe, as well. Lovely job. Thank you, Jackie, once again.
Well, thank you, Paul, and I hope it's been helpful for everyone. I mean, I hope they got something out of it. Thank you very much for asking.
Yes, you're very welcome indeed. Righto, that's it then, folks. So if you're a man, maybe see you tomorrow at Man Tuesday. And if not, we will see you next time on the Hive. The next session is a relative of yours, Jackie. Reem is coming in on Thursday to talk
Thursday,
about,
yes, I'll be watching.
Yeah, nutrition for mental health. So super. Yeah, lots of thanks coming in. Lovely, excellent, marvellous. Right, thanks again. See you soon, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.